Welcome to another episode. Today, I'm joined by Josh Rudolph and Barnabe Monnot from the Ethereum Foundation, two very special guests who are leading the Interop efforts at the EF. Super glad we're finally getting to do this.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So, for listeners who might not be aware of your work, why don't we start with very quick introductions?
Sure.
Go for it.
I can start. Very quickly, I joined the EF almost exactly 3 years ago. I joined the same week as the merge. I've had the fortune of sort of a variety of work over the 3 years I've been at the EF. These days, as part of our 3 strategic initiatives at the EF, which is Scale L1, Scale Blobs, and Improve UX, I'm sitting on the Improve UX side with Barnabe. A lot that we can talk about there, but that is my focus these days: improve UX, interop, and making Ethereum feel like a single chain again.
Nice. As for myself, I joined EF almost the same week that COVID started, so very different experience in terms of hype and feeling great about it. But I've been at EF for about 5.5 years, working mostly on game theory and economics at the very beginning, so like fee markets, proof of stake, then thought a bit about MEV and all the proposer builder separations, like a lot of questions in there. And super happy now to be thinking more about Interop with Josh, who's been already doing a lot of work in that space.
I mean, you guys have been at the EF for a very long time, right? And then the sentiment around the EF has changed a lot in the last 5 years, I would say. Like this year, there seems to be a lot more positivity, a lot more proactive decision making and actions. Like, what is the reason for this change in energy?
I guess one thing I'll say, my perspective, having joined the same time as the merge, and I think in some ways it's been just an interesting sentiment, observing the sentiment since the time of the merge, which was a celebratory moment, of course, till now. My perspective, which of course is just one person's perspective, is that it took us a while to find our footing. I think after the merge, I think we were looking for something, sort of another rallying point, another thing for us to, as a community, to sort of organize around and to get behind. We, as your listeners know, operate as a very diverse, large, sometimes chaotic, but I think for the best sort of ecosystem. And when we don't have this, we had this thing, the merge, for a long time that everyone was clearly rallying around. Then all of a sudden that went away, and it left a bit of a vacuum. And I don't think we were quite ready for that shift to have this thing that unified us in such a strong way, and then it went away, and then it's and so I think more recently it just took us a while to find our footing. And I think having these 3 strategic initiatives, not to sort of over-index on these things are meant, I guess, to be clear, not as the end game for our planning, or for our it's meant to be really sort of more for the next 12 to 24 months at the absolute maximum in terms of what our focus and what our priorities are. But having something like this, just as an example, not that these things are the only thing I can point to here, but having something that we can sort of organize around, rally around, has been really helpful. Yes, and I think there's just been a lot of work behind the scenes that maybe folks haven't really, that are finally sort of coming to surface, whether it's from other teams within the EF, whether it's from teams outside of the EF, other interop providers, Li-Fi across, Hyperlane across the sort of broader ecosystem. A lot of great work has been happening. So I think we're just sort of seeing all these things finally starting to come to the surface and make progress. And then this all sort of culminated with some of the restructuring of the EF, the new co-EDs, Xiaowei and Tomas, who, from my perspective, were put in a very challenging position, and I think have done an amazing job at making sure that we continue to operate with the sort of, without losing track of protecting the core properties of Ethereum, and without sort of abandoning where we've come from, but also making sure that we can meet the moment of 2025. So yes, that's my sort of take on it.
I mean, it almost sounds like you found a purpose again, right? Like with the merge, everyone had their energies directed towards this one direction. But then, like with any normal, like any project, when there's a mainnet TG event, like there's a blow off top in a way, and then you have to restructure, recalibrate. There are new people in the team, and then you find a new purpose and go at it again. Like that's a very normal thing. But then in crypto, sentiment changes with price action, with like bull markets, bear markets. So I feel like just the fact that ETH is back above 4K, that also changed a lot of sentiment, especially on crypto Twitter, which is a weird thing to say because like this is your day-to-day work, but this is also the reality. So like, would you say there's a change in overall strategy from the EF? Like from the outside, it's clear that the EF is more hands-on in their approach, and this is not just for Interop, right? Like I can just see a change in strategy in that sense.
No, yeah, I would say so. I mean, as you mentioned, like price action might have an impact on how people feel about Ethereum, but I also do want to believe that internally, like we've had a lot of soul searching and said, well, we have to do things a bit differently. We have to find like this new North Star or direction, or especially like for the short term and addressing the main blockers that people see when they think about launching their protocols or their products on Ethereum. Like they want scale, they want cheap fees, they want the tools to work, they want Interop to be seamless. So yeah, taking that input to heart and finding ways to embed that into the DNA and the structure of the foundation, I think that was sort of the goal, and probably also came with a bit of a strategic reevaluation of how we do things and also which things we should be really working on.
Maybe just one note. Yes, like these 3 focus areas for the EF is something that has been communicated a bit more strongly from the EF in terms of the EF maybe just taking a stronger stance or having a more clear, more legible perspective on things. But I would also say, and this isn't just me trying to sort of fit something that is no longer the case, but I do think it's really also the EF and others distilling and bringing these things that were already sort of out there in sort of the community out there in the ecosystem around teams realizing that we needed to put our focus into these areas. So I think a lot of this is pulling things that were already out there, kind of floating around, and putting it into writing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, like both of you are spending a lot of time working on the Interop track, right? And there's a big push, like you said, to improve UX across Ethereum. The community is almost demanding it at this point, and like the EF has also recognized this need. So, what's the mandate, and how are you approaching that topic as a whole?
I see. Yeah, perhaps we inherited this improve UX topic, like the header from just like these conversations that were distilled, as Josh was saying. And then I think when we started like this preliminary work of saying, well, what does UX mean? We realized it's a ton of stuff. Like it's what you see when you're like logging into your favorite app. It's the developer experience of like using smart contract languages. It can be the staking UX, like when you're a staker or an operator on the network, like how do you think about your operations and stuff like this. And so I think we had to almost like make a choice of like, yeah, we can't tackle everything at once. And there are different parts of the ecosystem that are very well suited to tackle some of them. And so for Josh and I would say our focus has been, well, Interop feels like very key and very foundational to a lot of even like the higher level like UX issues that people are experiencing when they're trying to do actions across chains. And so that felt like both a good match for our own skill set, but also like high leverage for the ecosystem to to have this work going on that's kind of EF led, that brings a lot of like energy and momentum. And also a lot of it has to do with protocol changes, where I would say a lot of the unique expertise to do these things does reside at the EF itself. So yeah, I think this was really the point for us to say our focus would be on Interop. But that being said, like as we also noted in this update that we posted, it's not the only UX related thing that really happens at the EF. Like there's also a separate effort that's more privacy focused, Kohaku Wallet, and also an effort that's more around like security. And so you can think of it as a UX of, yeah, when I'm a user like using my wallet, I know that I won't be scammed by some blind signing, or when I'm a developer, I'm going to have like good smart contract practices to prevent bugs or such things. So we have like different things. It still doesn't address like the universe that UX really is, but I think yeah, we're doing best effort to fill the gaps as quickly as we can.
Josh, anything to add there?
I guess I would just add that our goal, and it's a challenge at times to define what does it mean to solve Interop, and maybe we could talk a bit about this. But and there's a meme of Interop already being solved. But I think that the way that I look at it, at least, and is that what we need to do is we need to remove friction from the user journey. We need to identify the most common user flows, and we need to make sure that we remove the biggest source of friction. And this is maybe just sort of my mid-curve take, but I think right now there is a lot of areas that have meaningful friction that contribute to it feeling like a fragmented ecosystem. It's just the fact that it is a fragmented ecosystem today. And what's my point? My point is in terms of identifying and removing this friction, in terms of sending a transaction across chains as simple as a single chain transaction, and hopefully even beyond that, as simple as more common Web 2 flows. Like, this really should be our North Star. It should be as simple as, I don't know, sending a text message or something. It should be like to send a transaction across chains, across the Ethereum ecosystem. The way that I look at it in terms of like, what should the EF's role be there? We should stay focused on what our goals are. We should stay focused on what are sort of non-negotiables or things that we can never sacrifice, which is the permissionless and censorship-resistant nature of the network. And we can talk about like, what does that mean forever? But and to me, we identify what the goals are, we identify what our non-negotiables are, what the things are that we can never compromise, and then we figure out what is the path for us getting there. And if that looks like the EF taking a less active role, that might be the case. I think these days we're realizing that there is much more opportunity for folks within the EF to take not to, of course, unilaterally drive things forward, but to take a much more active role in ensuring that things are moving towards the destination that we all want to get to. So yes, I think there's certainly room for and certainly a need. I think this is what we've maybe a bit too slowly realized, is that many folks from within the ecosystem, many even other Interop providers, many people that have been working in Interop for a long time, are really asking for the EF to step up a bit more here.
I mean, I don't envy your position, right? Because solving interop is such a wide problem statement. Like, where do you even start, and what do you address first, right? And honestly, you guys have done a really good job in the last 12 months just getting everyone together and having these conversations, because earlier they were being done in like silos at conferences, but nobody actually addressed this. So like that's definitely one of the most positive things to come out of it, that the entire ecosystem would come together every Wednesday on like the Interop working group call, and then at least talk about these things, right? But then another sentiment within the Interop community is that it's a little bit too little too late, because if these things happened 3 years ago, maybe we would have all built together, right? Like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there was no mandate whether the EF would jump in, or like, how do you build these solutions? And as like free markets do their thing, everybody just built their own solution and then like took their own approach to solve this. So like, I'm not sure, like, do you guys have any thoughts on why now as the right time to kind of double down on solving interop as opposed to earlier? And then how has that complicated the situation in a way, because there are so many teams right now, and then some are ahead of the others, some are like more willing to collaborate, some are not, because like everybody has made their bets already.
Right. I don't know that I have a great answer to the question of. I think it's true. I think it's a good thing to acknowledge that we are playing a little bit of catch up now, or a lot of catch up. I don't think it's a bad thing to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge the urgency with which we need to move. And I think we, even on the urgency side of things, or the sort of making sure that the slope continues to be steep enough, and that we're not just getting everyone together to put a bunch of logos and brands together where we're not actually making any progress. And so that's something that I'm very mindful of. And yes, and I think in terms of your question, in terms of like, well, why did it take so long to get here? I don't know, maybe Barnabe would have more thoughts as someone that's been around longer than myself, but yes, I think it took us a while to get our footing, and now we're here. So I try to be more forward looking, but I do think it's interesting to look at why it took us a little while to get here.
And maybe one element I can add is I joined EF around the time that people were thinking a lot about ETH 2 or ETH 2.0, like this idea of like you have these shards and you have these cross-link and basically like a baked-in interoperability and shards. And a few months after I joined, Vitalik came with this post, the roll-up-centric roadmap, and said, like this sharding boondoggle, like it sounds like super hard, and we're losing like a lot of momentum on this, and we have this solution like roll-ups that's actually extremely scalable and solves like a lot of our problems, and also has like this almost like positive social dynamics that more people will come in, like more innovation, different thoughts, different philosophies, and will build like different things. And so I think for maybe 3-4 years after that, first there was the merge, as Josh was saying, that was like just extremely made us very busy. And then this idea that like at the back there's these very smart people building like roll-up stacks, and we as like the EF, we really like need to concern ourselves with the core protocol and pushing changes and stuff like this. And not to say there was nothing done at EF.
Yeah.
We had like this roll call that was like fairly active for a long time. But I think at the end of the day, it was possibly, kind of a realization that, or not realizing that our role should be potentially even larger than we thought. And then problem identification, like Interop can be so many different things. Like you can be thinking about sync composability, you can be thinking about intents, you can be thinking about bridges. Like there's so many layers to it. And finding like the right places to intervene and to make progress as EF, I think that was also something that just took a bit of time.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because it's like there's a North Star for the Ethereum community, and for a long time it was just like ETH 2.0, and then in the meantime other things were happening in the ecosystem, and Interop just happened to be one of them, and it just exploded, right? Like the number of chains, the number of assets, the number of like bridges that are out there, and nobody sort of expected this to take shape in the span of 3 years, which is like right now we have the benefit of hindsight. Like we can talk about why this happened, why that did not happen, but then like it's not helpful. Like you said, probably being forward looking is way better. Let's talk about how you're approaching this right now, right? So the EF in general has been very neutral with their approach. Like you don't push one solution onto others. Like you try to promote a bunch of different solutions and then trying to come up with the best solution, right? So how opinionated can you be in your approach, and how are you balancing what the foundation pushes versus what parts do you leave to the ecosystem?
I would say we're not always unopinionated, because at the end of the day, even for like core protocol changes, like there is something to ship, and we end up shipping something that has like some features that we think are important. And when I say we, it's not just EF, it's also like the community as a whole. So we say, I don't know, like EIP 1559, we think it's a good idea, present it to the community, get feedback, academic papers written about it that say you should do it like this, not like that, etc. So we're not like, every solution is like equal, because some of them are just clearly broken. But sometimes it's just, you don't want to say company A is like much better than company B and just like kill the market and intervene like too strongly. So I think there's a bit of like a balancing act, probably, like because there is classes of solutions that perhaps are more trust minimized, are more censorship resistant, or are better aligned with like the properties of the core protocol that we also want to expand to like the layers that sit above. So we can be opinionated in the sense that if we see a solution that clearly satisfies like these desiderata, we'll say, we should be thinking about this class of solution and not the class that's like clearly broken or has like trade-offs that we don't love. But otherwise, I think for instance, what we released like this track with the projects, I think saying that, well, we see intents as like a very strong class of solution that can be made even stronger, and a good way to patch over like some of the UX problems that people experience when they do cross-chain. I think I would say that's somewhat opinionated. It's not like this intent protocol is the best and everybody should be using that one. But I think it is taking a step in saying we think that this is actually a good solution for the time being.
Yeah, I think maybe there's also a misconception out there that the EF is unable or unwilling to take and articulate strong opinions, which I think there is there's a reason why that's out there. There's been some truth to that, I think, historically. I think at least I'll just speak personally. My take on it is that the priority is to make sure that the Ethereum L1 maintains, the core protocol maintains these characteristics of being a maximally neutral, permissionless chain. In order to get there, the EF often must make strong, opinionated choices. Our mandate is to ensure the protocol maintains neutrality and permissionless. Our mandate isn't to never articulate our own opinions. Obviously, we make lots of decisions every week, every month, sometimes slower than we would like. But this is how I view things: is that this is sort of what our priority should be, and yeah, how at least I approach it.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, and Barnabe, as you mentioned, the EF has been opinionated about intents being like one way to solve some of the UX problems. And in the early days, it was the ERC 7683. And today, there's a lot more focus on the open intents framework, right? So maybe you can tell us more about that, because that's an effort that's been going on for the last 6 months. And it seems like it's at the culmination stage where like we're about to see something go live in production.
Yeah, I'll pass this one to Josh, actually, because he's been leading OIF quite strongly, like since before even I started on the Interop. Yeah.
Yeah, so the open intents framework is an ecosystem-wide effort from a really great group, including LI.F, Across, Hyperlane, Open Zeppelin, Wonderland. I may be forgetting someone right now, but and then being pushed, shepherded, and yes, in some ways organized by myself at the Ethereum Foundation. I really view it as, I guess I'll say one thing before I get into more of a description of what the OIF actually is, but in many ways, I view the OIF as sort of a culmination of the work that has been underway by many across the ecosystem for 1, 2, 3 years now, and finding a way for us to turn this into a maximally open, like the name says, modular, and easy to use framework. So the goal is to allow us to get intents to all of the chains as seamlessly and easily as possible. Right now, there's a problem with many of the long tail chains. It takes a while. You have to go and have the right relationship to get sort of the infrastructure onto your recently launched chain. These kinds of things. There's many different sort of parallel efforts that have been underway for a long time that maybe didn't always plug into each other in the best way possible. So making sure that as the OIF that we're building this, again, maximally open, modular, almost sort of menu of intent-based solutions that anybody can come and pick and choose from, pick and play, and you can easily swap out things if there's for example, more trust minimized or fully trustless backend settlement system that you want to plug into the OIF 6 months from now, 18 months from now. You should be able to do that. So yes, intents are great. They have limitations. Intents are not going to come out. The OIF is not going to come out and magically solve all of our problems. But I do think it is a really productive step forward to organize all these efforts together and to make sure that we're able to leverage intents, the strengths of intents, the best ways that we can.
Yeah. So if I understand correctly, like it's a framework to be used by chains and application teams who have sort of like identified intents as the way to go, but don't want to go with like one provider. So now they can like pick and choose from like the selection of the open intents framework.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's an open framework that allows each of the intent layers to sort of, in some ways, operate a bit more independently. So whether this is origination, fulfillment, settlement, rebalancing, we're able to improve each of these, and we're able to allow teams to, to sort of pick and play and to pick which item best meets their needs.
How do you see like the adoption of something like this? Because of course there's also proprietary solutions in the market, right? And there's a lot of them. So where do you see this framework fitting into the Ethereum EVM ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the honest answer is something that we're still sorting through and still figuring out. Where I'm most optimistic is in some of the work that's underway to, for example, wrap some of the OIF or deliver the OIF in an SDK that wallet teams may be able to integrate in an easy way. I think right now, wallets still are the sort of best access point, or sort of closest to the user layer that we can leverage to get these sort of things into the hands of users. So to me, like, imagine, I guess another way to say it is like, if we fail at the wallet layer, then I think in many ways we won't be able to solve Interop. We won't be able to unify the ecosystem. So I really do see wallets as a critical piece here, and I am very optimistic and confident that we'll be able to work closely with many of the wallet teams in the coming months to get the OIF into users' hands.
I think like one of my hopes in general is that what the base structure that's been built with the OIF, I hope like Interop teams kind of build on top of it as well, right? Like at least that's the direction we're taking at LI.F, which I very much resonate with, because then you're actually compounding on the efforts, right? And you're not building your own solutions. Yeah. So yeah, I also want to talk about the asset issuance part of the stack, right? So you've like there's a lot of discourse about intents and sort of like how that fits into like solving the UX problems. But another part of the stack where like Interop protocols have found PMF is the asset issuance layer, right? And I don't see any sort of like conversation going on right now about that part of the stack, which is sort of like ironic, because if you think about it, that's the deepest layer, and you can solve a lot of the problems by just going straight at the core of the problem.
Okay, I think for asset issuance, I agree that it's like very deep in the stack and almost like underpins like a lot of the interoperability solutions, and is like in fact a big driver of adoption, like for certain types of bridges, etc. And I almost feel like this is infrastructure that's fairly entrenched, and to some extent positively, like it's things that work. It's people like using these bridges to deploy their assets in places where, using the current infrastructure that Ethereum has, like the canonical roller bridges, is just too slow. Or if you are the native issuer like Circle is for USDC, then you can just do your own thing, like have your own bridge. So I would say until we actually improve the Ethereum infrastructure itself, I think it's going to be pretty hard to really, shake the board enough that things change at that layer. And it's also not perfectly clear to me, like, and I haven't like deeply thought about this issue, but it's not super clear to me that at the moment, like, this is the right move for us to do. I think we just see that it's infra that works, that's deployed, that's like fairly widespread, and we just see like, our opportunity zone to be perhaps like almost like sandwiching these things. So at the top with like intents kind of riding on top of these bridges, and the bottom with like the protocol changes like faster finality, shorter slots, etc. That also would bridge a bit that gap that we have between these fast bridges and the solutions that Ethereum carries as a protocol.
I do think it's important also just to add that the L1 maintains its place as a hub for asset issuance, as well as a liquidity hub. And I guess maybe just to add on to what Barnabe mentioned, I think right now it's really about sort of identifying what are the highest leverage areas. Where can we actually, what are the most important? There's a lot to do. What can we actually do to reinforce the L1 as this asset issuance and liquidity hub? And I think right now a lot of this goes back to core L1 protocol improvements around finality time, confirmation, and other things that we can do to increase the sort of these core properties of the L1. So it's not going to be an overnight thing. Yes, and there's a lot to do at the L1 layer to before we can, I think, get further down the sort of issuance pipe.
So like, I mean, there's another school of thought, right? Like, what if ETH could be minted and burned across the entire EVM chain stack, right? Like, if you remember, XCRC20 was a standard that was trying to do justice, but those efforts failed, unfortunately. But that could solve a lot of problems for like the intent stack as well, because you can now rebalance very easily. So like, is there a way for that to be part of like your approach, or have you thought about that?
I would say in the end game, that's sort of what we want. So how these mint and burn bridges work is you have the issuer of record essentially like maintaining its own internal ledger of, there's these assets went on that side, and I'm confident that that side is finalized enough that I can cross it out on my ledger and put it like on the other side. The issuer of record for ETH is the Ethereum L1. So if you can convince the Ethereum L1 that something was locked in some place and then burned, etc., then you can do this mint and burn like native ETH almost on every zone. The blockers to this today are just long settlement times on rollups. So the only way to really convince the L1 is to be a rollup first. Like you have to post your DA on Ethereum, and then you have to convince the L1 that the execution is correct. So proofs, like fraud proofs or validity proofs. But yeah, as we know, this takes time because first rollups don't post their data like all the time. There may be like some delays. Then if you're an optimistic rollup, that data might be finalized on the L1, but it might not be settled because you still have this challenge period that can be up to 7 days long. And so until like these things are resolved, the issuer of record, like the L1, cannot convince itself that the ETH has been like, legitimately moved from one place to the other. But, and that's something that we also discuss a little bit in this note, like what we see is a future where with fast finality and real-time proving, like we're able to make sure that the system is like solidified very quickly and the information is just fully verifiable across as many places as possible in this like roll-up networks of Ethereum. And then you have almost like frictionless movement of assets that are native to Ethereum and in particular ETH itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fast finality has been a topic in Interop for the longest time. And then, like, if you ask any team today, they will say, like, once the Ethereum L1 fast finality times are fixed, like, Interop will be solved. So I know you guys are working in that direction, and that's what you meant by like solving a lot of the L1 core problems, which can actually, impact the UX layer later on. So in terms of fast finality, what near-term changes should the community expect? And what are you guys working on?
Yeah, I can discuss that a bit. So when we say fast finality, the version of finality that we mean is the one where all the validator set of Ethereum votes on some kind of prefix of the chain and says, this is what we see as being final. Today, this process takes between 13 and 19 minutes. So it's like very slow to get this finality. And the hope is that in the future, we can get that to the order of seconds. So definitely below 10 seconds. It will take time because you have this very large validator set and you need to find like very clever ways to either shrink it or rotate it or find ways to get these people like to come to an agreement on like the root of the chain. But we're not entirely blocked, I would say, on like having this new version of like fast finality that may be like a different consensus model with like different validator set management. There are things we can do along the way that would already like help make the current system like a bit more usable and available. So one of them is shortening the slot time. Like if we can do that, if we can halve the slot time, we can actually halve the finality time. So from 19 minutes to 6 to 9 minutes, which is still pretty long, longer than most networks, but already like 50% improvement. Another thing we can do is actually look at a different version of finality that we think is slightly weaker than the full finality of like the entire validator set, but extremely strong in its own right. So we call that synchronous finality. It's also described as the fast confirmation rule in the update that we have. And it's the idea that because we have like this giant validator set that needs to vote, it votes progressively on the blocks that are included on the chain. And already, like when you look 1 or 2 blocks deep, there's billions of dollars that have expressed an opinion about what is the current head of the chain. And you can make very safe claims with some assumptions that are different than like the full finality that takes 15 minutes, but still strong claims that, yeah, once you've seen like enough of these votes, which are like progressive votes, you can convince yourself that the block that you're looking at is quite final, as long as the network is synchronous and as long as there's a fraction of the network that's not adversarial. And we think actually this synchronous finality is a very good option for people and protocols to use until like we get to this much shorter full finality. Like in particular, we know like from a bit of just like cursory research that some of the centralized exchanges, they don't wait for the full finality to happen. Like they're convinced lower than this, but they're still fairly conservative in like the number of blocks that they want. And so with this synchronous finality that we're working on, exposing it better, like in the consensus clients, we can go to these centralized exchanges and say, look, you came up with a number that's like conservative because you don't want to like make a mistake here, but we actually have like a number that's lower than this and comes like with a very strong safety proof. And so you should use that. And then that will already make like some parts of the system, like some of the Interop protocols that need to settle, we can use this as long as the value is like not crazy high. Some of the centralized exchanges like withdrawals and deposits can be done in the order of 10 to 30 seconds instead of like minutes, which is, I think, a pretty nice improvement, and really can tidy us over until we have like this final frontier of fast finality in, 3 years or so.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, in theory, the finality times are 13 minutes, 19 minutes. But then in practice, if you talk to any of the Interop teams, nobody actually waits for the entire period, right? Like, they're all using their own formulas for soft confirmations, and then they take on that risk. And it sounds like a good short-term solution to give them some sort of like reliable metric that, okay, this is confirmed. But like if you want full finality, like you can wait longer. So it may not be perfect for, I don't know, high value transactions, or if somebody is trying to build a stable coin payment network on top of Ethereum. But then for intents, this is like the ideal trade-off.
Yeah, exactly. And the bet that we have is that the latency of this synchronous finality rule is probably lower than what most people use when they cook their own confirmation rule, because you don't want to make a mistake here. It's like there's a long academic paper that gives you like the right proofs. And so with that we just like expose it in the client. People can consume the endpoint and just like not have to think about it, not have to cook their own confirmation rule, just rely on the fact that that one is proven safe. So I think it's great, and we're working like really hard to make it available as soon as possible. I would expect a couple of months, and hopefully Q1 next year.
And is there a world where we see shorter withdrawal periods for L2s, or is the 7-day challenge period always going to be something that like the ecosystem has to deal with?
I can start with that one. I know Josh has also been thinking about it a little bit. That's also something, we've heard a lot from Interop protocol saying, shortening the slot time, faster finality, this is nice. But actually one of the main things is like this 7-day period, because you have these solvers like fulfilling the intents, so their capital ends up like in different places. They want to rebalance, and then they have to wait like a long time to cross these bridges. And so the cost of capital is much higher. You know that. Everybody knows that in Interop. And so, so then naturally you were like, okay, can we get this window down? And I would say one of the most promising approaches that we've seen is one that Vitalik wrote about in an EF Magician post, like this 2 out of 3 finality mechanism. So for optimistic rollups, like having a second type of proof, can be like T's, ZK, that helps like, safety check that, okay, we can do things faster, and then we have like a backup in case that fails. So almost like a multi-sig around the proving. We've mentioned that in our note as a focus area for ourselves, but actually there's already a lot of ongoing work that's not directly led by the EF, like the Marts from Flashbot, like recently started a working group around this. I also know that there's some versions of EOP stack that are more friendly to being like ZK proven. So I think our role here would be to accelerate these efforts as much as possible and try to help provide some of our own resources to just help move things along and get rollups to reduce this challenge period.
Josh, what do you think?
I agree. This is actually one of the areas that I'm most bullish in term, and this is great because we have the teams of Arbitrum, Optimism, others. I don't want to steal their thunder. I'm sure they'll have more news to share here in the coming weeks and months, but this is something that teams within each of these orgs are actively working on in collaboration with other teams like Boundless and Risk Zero, Six Inc, and many others. And the Flashbots team is jumping in now and landing a hand as well. So this is actually one of the areas where I'm very optimistic that we have a lot of hyper competent people working on this and prioritizing it now. I think it's clear that this is one of the sort of highest leverage opportunities for us as an ecosystem, and it's yes, and so this is something that I'm really excited to see us make progress on in the coming months.
And like Barnabe, you mentioned ZK playing a part here, right? Like, I feel like ZK is something that's thrown at every problem, that it'll be the magic bullet that solves everything, right? So in terms of Interop and in this context, like, how do you see ZK fitting in, and what are the sort of timelines that someone can expect? Because a few years ago, it would seem like, okay, everybody had ZK on their roadmap, but nobody had it actually in production. But now, like, these solutions are going live on mainnet, and then we're seeing them being adopted more and more.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like going faster than most people expected, including myself. Like in the protocol research teams of like EF, I think we've always thought, once we get to like the ZK world where things are super fast, and overnight almost, like, or maybe within a month, like we're like, oh wait, actually this is like happening in a couple of years. So we need to very actively design for that future. And I think what we see is, in particular, we scale the L1 track. That's also like one of the strategic priorities in EF. Is thinking a lot about like, how do we get to like this point where ZK is just fully integrated in the Ethereum protocol itself, and has thoughts around like, perhaps we can have these attester clients that are a subset of the nodes on the network, and have like some kind of ZK endpoint, and doesn't have to re-execute, and we can use them as like almost canaries in the coal mine to make sure that this is working well, and over time like just increase our confidence. So a big part of it is probably making the tech itself like feel leaned enough that we can just rely on it almost eyes closed. But it's not just like time on in the market. It's also, there's a lot of like research engineering and just like finding bugs and making the VMs like faster, like the proofs latency like decreased, etc. So so what I expect is, it's always difficult to change live systems, generally speaking, so that should take quite a bit of time. But more and more like these ideas around having sidecars, or like 2 out of 3, or make just become comfortable like replacing some other parts of the system with something ZK here and there, and perhaps like having a fallback that's we're a bit more confident, like has been used like more frequently for especially like high value transfers or messages or things like this. And then just over time, like seeing, this is working well, we are comfortable with ZK, and this just like starts to replace most of the re-execution and most of the things that we're doing today.
Josh, are you bullish on ZK, and do you see it going live in the next like 12 months?
I'm bullish on ZK. I am very unclear on the timelines, but I'm bullish on it being something that we should continue to invest in as an ecosystem. Yes, I think I often, even myself, sometimes fall into the trap of wishful thinking that ZK is going to come in and be this magical thing that solves all of our problems. And I can point to and say, look, I helped solve Interop. Thank you to all the ZK teams. But yes, I think the reality is that we should continue to invest in it, but it's not going to be something in the next 6 months, 9 months that is going to solve all of our problems. That's for sure. So we need to, at the same time, make sure that we're kind of keeping a sober perspective on this, and that my perspective, at least, is that we can't wait years to make meaningful progress, to continue to make meaningful progress on the UX side, on the interop side. And so we need to, make sure that we're pushing things forward in sort of tandem with ZK.
Yeah, I mean, I love how like all the different projects that both of you have undertaken at the EF kind of fit in together, and Interop sort of touches every part of the stack, right? So like if you improve the L1, you improve the UX. If you improve like ZK tech and like integrate it, you still improve the EX. So that's the pro and con of like working in Interop, that you sort of touch everything. But I love the fact that there's so much momentum and discourse about Interop and like solving the UX problems. And you guys are doing a great job. So thanks a lot for your efforts, and thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you, Arshan.
Thank you for this.
Perfect.